Welcome everyone to Button Pushers. I'm Ben,
I'm Meg. Hi.
and welcome back. This week we're talking about how to be effective in the ways that you study and apply yourself to your learning in X-ray tech school, because I think we can all agree that that transition to clinical learning is weird, right? Like you go from learning in the classroom to all of a sudden learning hands-on, and that's great. But how does that change the way that we study? So Meg's come up with some awesome stuff. I'm gonna be chiming in a little bit too, but Meg, what are some things that you've noticed? And I should add, this time today is primarily for the students. So students, give yourself a pat on the back. But I can say as a seasoned tech, you never stop learning. For us as educators too, there's gonna be a lot here as well. So this is for the students, but we're all learning. We're all students at some level.
hmm Absolutely. Yeah, so hopefully I'll try to keep my soapbox kind of short on this one because I know I can kind of go off on these. But first off, what I wanted to start with is just saying that if you want to see a change, you're going to need to make a change. And I have been blown away by the number of students who've been in my office the past couple of weeks who are not doing very well. And I encourage them, if they're below an 80% on any test or anything, come see me. Let's tutor, let's talk things out. And the number one thing that they're doing is the exact same thing that they have been doing. They're still studying the exact same way. They're like, well, I guess I'll just, do more of the exact same thing. Whatever you're doing, I'm sorry, if you're not doing great, you're not doing great. You got to change
Mhm.
something.
That's
This
so
isn't
true.
high school, right? Like, this is college and you have to be proactive about your education. So, if you're having any problems, you have to realize that all of us instructors, like, we're not here for the money, right? Like, not here for the money. Anyways. So, we're here for the
I try
students,
not to
right?
laugh about that.
I'm like, where do I go? No, we're going to calm that down. So, we
Um,
want to, what did you?
well,
I feel like I'm blushing.
no, this is good. This is all really good, Meg. I want to. I feel like my heart goes out sometimes to people who get caught trapped doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, which is
Mm,
like the definition of insanity, right?
right?
I think we've all
Yep.
had those moments where it's like, am I crazy? And you're saying, yes, you are crazy.
You
Stop
are.
doing the
Yeah.
same thing. Um, I want to just point out that once we have once we have a habit, right? It can be really scary to break a habit,
Yeah.
particularly when it's a habit that's maybe was beneficial to us in the past. Like you're saying in high school, this worked,
hmm
and now it doesn't work.
hmm Any kind of
Breaking
change is
that,
scary.
yeah, that any kind of change like that, it's like, well, this used to work, but they're saying
Yeah.
it doesn't work now. One of the things I tell my students this, and this is probably not what they want to hear, but school is a safe place to fail, right?
Yes.
School is a safe place to fail. You may not want to hear that, but it is. The X-ray tech lab is a safe place to fail because out in the clinical setting, that's not a safe place to mess up.
hmm
Like people can get hurt or you can get hurt. But messing up on a test because you didn't because you're trying out a new study pattern, guess what? You're a good scientist now. Like you're
hmm
trying out something new and you're
Yes.
experimenting and you're saying, oh, it didn't work perfectly, but if I change this, this, and
Yeah.
this, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to add that yes, it can be scary to make these changes, but
hmm
I agree with the need to change if we're not seeing
hmm
success.
Well, and look at the most successful people, like business people, inventors, anyone. They're not successful until they fail. Like you have to fail. So if you think you're going to go through X-ray school and not fail a single test, well, rude awakening, right? And if you
Yeah.
did, then you're just a natural genius and you should continue on and be a radiologist or something else, right?
Right.
But otherwise, like you want to fail because then that gives you an opportunity to grow. And if you don't have that growth mindset, then you're going to be set up for a lot of disappointment in your life. Like look at
Mhm.
failure as a good thing. It is a very good thing. It is an opportunity to be better and to change and to grow. So, on that note,
You just covered a lot of that was a lot right there. So I want to highlight one thing about the growth mindset
yeah,
because some people may not understand what that means and how significant that is in
fair. Yeah.
education. Like, so I have students who will say, I'm no good at math, right?
hmm
So that's an example of not having a growth mindset. It So maybe in the past you struggled with math, or maybe you even have a family member who says like, you're not supposed to be in college. No one in this family's ever gone to college. You know what I mean? Or
Ouch.
maybe there's even something in our society, like a bias against your ethnicity or your gender or whatever. You know what I mean? And those are real obstacles that society has placed in your way, but you're not defined by those things at all. It's not like, you know, I've got blue eyes, and if I try really hard, I cannot change my eyes to be brown, right? But that's not how my brain works. That's not how your brain works. You can actually change the patterns of your thinking, and you can actually rewire, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
the circuitry of your brain. And so maybe in the past you struggled with algebra, right? I struggled with algebra in high school, but guess what? I love it now. Because again, I was like, I'm going to engage with this. It's going to be painful,
Mm-hmm.
but I can grow. So it's, your brain is more like, it's not like your eyes. It's not a fixed thing. There's no such thing as like, I'm not good at math. It's more like I can learn how to be better at it.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. The brain is like a muscle, and you work it out. And no, I can't lift like 400 pounds like my first day in the gym, but I can maybe lift 50, and then I build up, you know. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with learning what Meg's gonna be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
kind of.
I had to add that. Like that's
No,
such
no,
a
that's
huge,
good.
rich thing. And I think so many students, especially first-time college attenders or
Mm-hmm.
students from a marginalized parts of society, they need to hear that, like
Mm-hmm.
desperately need to hear that, that like you are not defined by these things, like you can grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Well, like what you were saying with the algebra, there's a huge difference between saying I'm not good at algebra versus I'm not good at algebra yet. You throw
right,
that yet on there, and that shows that you are willing to grow and that you're willing to try and that you're going to, guess what? You might have to do a little bit more work than the person next to you. And that's going to make that satisfaction when you succeed that much more.
right.
Like you're going to feel amazing when you get a really good grade versus that person who's gotten an A every single test. So
Mm.
lucky for them, but they're going to probably be struggling in, English or something else. And you have a one leg up on that. So
I'm secretly thinking their dating life. You know what I mean? It's like, you never made any mistakes. Like that's not gonna work too well in dating.
yeah, yeah, true.
Sorry.
So kind of along those lines, I think one of the biggest things, especially for radiology schools, having a support group.
Mm.
So, yeah, a lot like we have assigned labs. We have like 4 labs for our class of, I think we have 26 in a class. And so we end up having these smaller groups of about 6 to 8 students, and they click. They end up like by the end of the semester, they've been working together and they had the opportunity to like kind of form a smaller group. But at the beginning of the semester, I'm like on them and I, try to peer pressure them to exchange phone numbers because I know I was painfully shy when I was in radiology school. Like I had one friend, and when that one friend wasn't at my clinical site, I was so quiet. Um, I was one of the classes I took was speech, and I can't, I hated that class. And I
Yeah.
cannot believe that I am now an instructor because I mean, when I say painfully shy, like I was one of those people who turned like beet red. And
Yeah.
now I stand in front of people and talk every single day. It's crazy. But it was because I didn't quit. I was like, I'm just gonna get over this because I hate it. I hate being shy. But radiology school was hard because I only had that one friend and we didn't have every single class together. So when we were together, it was great. I had my friend, we could chit chat, we could position each other and stuff. But then when it wasn't her, I felt like an idiot. I felt like a loser.
Right.
I felt, shy. I wasn't going to talk to anybody. So in in addition to saying like, hey, you should have a couple of really good friends in radiology school, I also want to say like, expand that group, constantly be expanding that
Yeah.
group. In addition to that, you have no idea where your life is going to go in the future. And radiology is the smallest world ever.
Yep.
And
That's true.
right, like I know, like I could walk in any hospital right now and I could find somebody I know. And I haven't worked in this facility, this area for 5 years.
Yeah.
There's the community is so small, and people will reach out to somebody who works at another facility because they know that they know somebody else. So we're all like 1 degree away from each other. And, you might be looking at that classmate next to you and be like, well, they're, at the clinic and I'm at the hospital and it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. We're not going to see each other. You don't know where it's going to go in 5 years. Maybe they end up pursuing management and they end up being your boss one day. And then you're
Right.
applying for that job and you're like, well, didn't we go to x-ray school together? And be like, yeah, don't you remember me? No, we never talked. Well, I did talk to this person or I worked with this person. So who am I
Yeah.
going to hire? If you think that you're not going to like the who doesn't matter in radiology, you're sadly mistaken. Right?
I even think about how we connected. We just connected on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's like we're X-ray techs, and so we speak the same language.
Hmm.
Um, and so I mean, even just like reaching out, this would be crazy if out of this channel we had like a study group that formed, because I feel like those things could happen, you
Oh, that'd be
know?
so cool.
I know. But yeah, my way of kind of approaching it, and this is so nerdy, but like I think sincerity is like the new cool thing to be. Like to be super sincere all the time is like cool in my book. And so I would just like I would tell my fellow students like, look, y'all, if we if we play our cards right, like we're stuck together for the next 2 years, right?
Hmm.
If we play our cards right, we're gonna be friends for life.
Hmm.
That's
Very
cool.
true.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean, if you come into things with that kind of positive expectation, yeah, there's gonna be some
Hmm.
people who shoot you down. Guess what? You wouldn't want to be friends with them anyways. But
Hmm.
there's gonna be someone who really need to hear that, and they were encouraged because,
Yeah.
like, if I'm nervous and every time I walk into a classroom, whether I'm learning or I'm teaching, I feel nervous.
Hmm.
I think there's something about the classroom, like Parker Palmer talks about how the classroom is built on fear. And I think that's true. Students are afraid of getting a bad grade a lot of times. As a teacher, I've been afraid of being a fraud. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know
That's a
this
whole
well
nother
enough.
episode.
Yeah, it's a big thing. But it's all built on that. But if you just walk into the environment knowing, okay, everyone here is a little bit nervous.
Hmm.
Like I mean, you just engage from that point. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
hey, y'all, this is gonna be interesting. Let's make the best of this, you know? But,
Absolutely.
but I like what you're saying because it does, like, I failed calculus the first time I took it. And the only reason I had to retake it, it was completely humiliating. Um, the only reason I passed it the second time is I was like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, first time I took it, I sat in the back row. Maybe this time I'll sit in the front row or a middle row. Like that was
Oh, a
like how
change, huh?
in the
Okay.
weeds I was about this, but I was like, I can make this small change. So I sat towards the front, and this guy I knew from youth group from my church, I didn't know him super well, but he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Taking this awful class again." And he's like, "We should be in a study group." And I was like, I was
Hmm.
not about to ask someone else that, but that he asked me, and
Hmm.
he was a connector. He asked other people in the class. We formed a study group, and that's the only reason I passed that class.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
And I know, like, to this, once I learned that, like, you have to ask. You
Hmm.
have to ask. You have to put yourself out there. Um, then it was okay. After Nick asked me, I realized, okay, I can do this. There's
Hmm.
other people who need this, and I'm a
Hmm.
firm believer in study groups every time.
We should probably talk about what you guys should actually be talking about during these study groups instead of
Yes.
just boy trouble or what your dog did or this weekend or stuff. So for studying, I highly recommend, and I know Ben, you mentioned this a little bit too, but making a cheat sheet. I call it a cheat sheet. It's not a cheat sheet, but
Mhm.
it's a study guide. It's a outline. It's a study template, whatever you want to call it. But what I suggest these students do is we have a test every week because I like to keep information going and I test them on old stuff and new stuff. But I want them to write a cheat sheet, and they do this with any of the things that they think could be on the test. So bolded terms,
Mhm.
any historical things, dates. Oh my gosh, dates are great test questions. I mean, boring, but formulas. If you have any kind of like mnemonics or acronyms, anything that you know that's going to be on the test, you should put on this cheat sheet, and then you should keep studying it. Don't do this the day before the test. Start it on like Monday or Tuesday, the week before the test, and just rewrite it over and over and over. And you'll be surprised when you actually write something. When you write it again the second time, you're going to start remembering it better. And then you do it a third time and a fourth time, and you keep doing it, and you keep looking at the same stupid piece of paper with all these facts on it instead of a 10-page PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And then you are able to like have an idea of what you need to know for the test. And you can start cutting things down because you're going to start memorizing it and learning it. And then by the end, like the day before the test, you should have like 4 or 5 things on there, and that's it. Maybe it's just the formulas. Obviously, that's a good one. Maybe just definitions, a couple acronyms, whatever. I mean, for me, for my test, I let the students have a blank piece of paper. Most instructors do. Maybe yours won't. The registry will allow you to have a whiteboard. You
Mhm.
should be able to come in, and before you take your test, do not do this after you have started your test, because then your mind's going to get all mixed up. But as soon as you sit down, you should write down those 4 or 5 things and
Mhm.
then start your test. Now, don't spend more than like a minute doing this, because if it's a time test, you're going to run out of time. But you should be able to be like, oh, yeah, I need to know this formula, this formula, this formula. And if you had one of those formulas on your test and you didn't write it down, they're going to be all mixed up, and you're going to be like, was it, SID over SOD or OID, or, and then you're going to convince yourself what the right answer is based on the answers on the test.
Right.
So, yeah, the test is meant to confuse you. It's meant to have distractors. And if you allow that to happen, you're in a bad situation.
Yeah, I want to speak to that just a little bit because I think there's a challenge with specifically with studying for the registry. Um, I've had an opportunity to do some training with the ARRT, and they're all psychometricians. Like they sit around and they think about tests. That's all they do. I mean, they've got an ethics review thing that they do too, but excellence, ethics, and examination, those are like those are the principles of the ART. So one of the best things you can do as you're preparing for something like a standardized test, like the registry, is learn how to think more like the way that people think who make the test.
Yes.
Um, and one of the best things you can do to do that is to learn a little bit about how multiple choice questions work, because most programs frequently use multiple choice questions in their testing, and the ART almost solely uses multiple choice questions with a few exceptions like multiple selection and maybe like a few illustration type questions. They do not use true and false. Um, they don't use certain terminology. So I want to show you something real quickly because I think this might be helpful. I actually teach my students how to write multiple choice questions in the style of the registry exam. And so I'll zoom in on this just a little bit. A multiple choice question, I just call them MCQs. They've got the following parts. There's a stem, and that's normally a question or incomplete statement. There's a key, and that's the correct answer. And I always think about Legend of Zelda, like the little guy's looking for the key. You're looking for the key. And then there's distractors, and those are the plausible, that should say, but incorrect answers. Sorry, typo. Um, Plausible but incorrect answers, and the options just describe all the available ones. So that's what this is what this looks like here. So breaking it down, when evaluating the primary X-ray beam, which of the following statements best describes the result of any interaction that increases photon wavelength, that would be the stem, right? The options include all 4, and they will always have 4 options. So if you're going to learn how to do this, learn how to write 4, right? That's going to be super important because, again, that's what they have to do for the registry. They have to write 4. So if you can't write 4 for it, then it's probably not a good registry question. Like this is one of the reasons why it's super easy to write, for example, a question about wrist bones. Because think about it, like if I have an X-ray and I say, which wrist bone is this? Well, I have like 8 choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes writing distractors super easy. But it's at this, and by the same way, it's difficult to ask questions about the clavicle, right? Because there's just one of them, and it only has 2 articulations, and it's what else can you say about it,
Fantastic point. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're learning to think the way that people have to think when they're making these things up. And so you identify the distractors, you think about a key, and then also there's a critical thinking process here because as you think up, the hard part is thinking up the distractors, right? The
Yes.
hardest thing in all of this is making sure that you're articulating yourself with brevity, because you want to be short and sweet. But then coming up with reasonable, plausible distractors that are not also true, right? Because you wouldn't want to make a distractor that is simultaneously true. So I've done this now with my students for several years, and it's super beneficial. And I want to show you just real quickly how beneficial it's been. One of the things that we have done is we've released a free book. This book, I put it out. I'll put a link in it down below, completely free. And this was all written by my students. And it's 53 questions that were based on ARRT content specifications. So once you've learned this method, it becomes this powerful study tool. And you can share them. You can share them with other people. So I'm teaching a CT class right now and asking the students to write multiple choice questions. And then when they're ready to study for the exam, I just pick the good multiple choice questions, because there's always going to be some bad ones. But I distribute that to the class, and then the class is a study document.
That is a brilliant idea. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm stealing this. This is good.
we can create communities of learning, right? And so then the only other question is, well, what do I write a question about, right? What should my questions be? And the nice thing is the ARRT has already told us, so we can just Google ARRT content specifications. I'll put a link down below, but you just click on that link. It'll take you to the place where the ARRT tells you specifically what is on all of their registry exams. It's a lot of information, but they tell you what's on the exam. That the reason they do that is because, again, it's a standardized test. So they have to tell you what's going to be tested. But it all boils down to one thing. They have just one question they're interested in when it comes time for certification. And the question is a really, 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 really important question. It is, does this person know what they need to know to be successful their first day on the job? Can this person walk into a department and be an x-ray tech? That's all they want to know. And that to me kind of takes some of the pressure off, because once you're in your second year of clinical, if you don't know what you're going to need to know your first day on the job, I'm sorry, like maybe think about a job in advertising or something.
Yeah, not a good situation.
Yeah, but I think most students have developed the confidence. They've developed some competencies. You've proven competency. You can do a PA and lateral chest x-ray, et cetera, et cetera. So you have some idea what's going to be required that first day on the job. So really, like, the patient care section should just be a bunch of gimme questions, right? Because they're true to their word. I promise you, the ARRT, I've taken 3 registry exams. Every single one of those tests was just testing me on, did I know the basics of what it takes to do the job? You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great.
So that's like my thoughts, I guess, on how to study and also what to study when it comes to any given test.
I mean, honestly, I feel like we can probably do a whole nother episode on all this. And so I kind of feel like that might be a good stopping point, if you
Yeah,
agree.
sure.
And let's just wrap it up on that, because that was a lot of great stuff already. And let's pick this back up next week and kind of talk more about some study habits. This is great. This is 2 educators
Yeah.
totally geeking out.